Welcome everyone to what we're tenuously calling a digital humanities conversation about students in West Virginia at Marshall and the WVU creating video games. This is part of sort of a loosey-goosey speaker series that we have every once in a while with the digital humanities program at Marshall. Digital humanities, in the broad strokes, at Marshall it's a minor, but what it means is bringing together humanities ideas, approaches, and computer science ideas and approaches, and video games are sort of a neat field that sits right at the very center where humanities and computer science meets, right? It's digital storytelling and so much more. So this is a wonderful topic to have a little conversation about. And I'm lucky enough to have found 4 people who agreed graciously to volunteer their evening to talk about that with us. And that's going to be Jasmine Waite. She's an English student at Marshall, and together with Connor Rush from WVU, she's a part of FYRE Games, and they'll talk a little bit about what FYRE Games does, some of the games that they worked on, and what specific skills they bring to that. And next we have Andrew Corliss and Neil Loftus. Hi, thanks for waving. They're our winners of Marshall's Game Jam very recently. Andrew made the first place, Neil made the second place, and they'll talk a little bit about what they do, right? How they got into video gaming, what they like about creating video games, that kind of thing. And it's going to be a fairly loose, open conversation. We'll have sort of a very short input by all 4 of our panelists here, and then they can talk to each other. You can ask questions. I might ask questions, and we'll learn a little bit more about video game making in West Virginia. So thank you so much for being here, and I will hand it over to Connor Rush.
Man, I don't even know what to say. What do I talk about? Well, hi, my name is Connor Rush. I am the founder and I guess owner / whatever you want to call it of FYRE Games, and that is FYRE Games. We are a small independent studio out of Fairmont, West Virginia, I guess now Morgantown, West Virginia. And what I do is basically I make and program indie games and story-driven games primarily, and I've recently been bringing on a lot of collaborators, i.e. Jasmine, hello, for a lot of writing purposes and creative purposes, but it's always been a very small-scale thing, and I've been loving doing it since I was a little kid. I started this whole thing when I was like 12. Sorry, I'm not sure at all I'm supposed to talk about.
Thank you so much. That's wonderful. You mentioned you have something to share. Do you want to start with that?
Yeah, sure. So the first thing we have is something that actually, I'll bring this up second because it involves Jasmine as well. But the first thing I've been working on is something for a collection. Is anyone familiar with Dread XP or Dread X collection? It's fine if not. So what they are is a horror anthology series that contacts some developers around the world. They have multiple installments in this collection series, and each one is almost game jam style, where the developers all get a theme, and they are given a strict time limit in order to make something. And I was contacted to be part of the 5th one, and I was very honored. The theme was entertainment, and I came up with a little game called We Never Left, which is a first-person horror narrative game about a text-based game, and there's a lot of 80s aesthetics, and it takes heavy inspiration from, like classic horror films like Texas Chainsaw Massacre, Suspiria, etc. I have a few screenshots here if I can figure out how sharing works. Here, let me get my folder open. Okay, I think this should work. Maybe. Okay, I got that viewed.
It's happening. I can see something.
There's that. You're not in the photo window, though. I wanted you to view photos. Here we go. Here we go. This works. All right, so here's a few screenshots of the game. Nothing. Here we go. Let's try to get into the final stuff. Here we are. All right, so here's the start. It's a pixelated first-person horror game that combines text-based, like classic 80s text-based gameplay and first-person exploration into a weaving narrative. I'm very proud of it so far. I think it's making some great progress. I'm able to work with some amazing people. who are making their games for this anthology series. Some developers behind stuff like Lakeview Cabin, Silvio, people I look up to, and it's amazing to be able to be part of this experience. I'm kind of just scrolling through now. Yeah, that's just a quick look at the game. The other thing I'm working on, which is with Jasmine, and Jasmine, if you have any input on this, I would love to hear from you as well. But it is an untitled project that we are just calling Project Songbird for the moment. Not sharing a ton of details, but what I do want to say is that it is very, it's very abstract, and I think in terms of the narratives that I had previously made, it comes across as a lot more loose and abstract, and it is very symbolic, more delving deeper into like psychological type stuff, and going more into the horror genre, which is a place that I've found a lot of interest in recently. I can share a few screenshots of that. But if you're familiar with the work of writer-directors like Robert Eggers or Charlie Kaufman, it's very similar in style to something I would say like that. Let me try to figure out screen sharing again. I don't use Teams very much. I'm more of a Zoom person. So here are a few screenshots of Project Songbird. Very, very, very incredibly early in development, I should add. So a lot of things are subject to change here. Yeah.
Excellent. Thank you so much for the sneak peek.
No worries.
Wonderful. Should we hand it over to Jasmine?
Go for it.
Hello, Jasmine.
Can you hear me? Okay. Actually, some of those pictures, if not all of them, are the first time I'm also seeing them. So, Project Songbird, I'm really right now am enjoying the narrative of exploring our character Dakota, and their little brother at the time is right now Reggie, I believe.
I threw a name in there.
I have him in as Finley in my draft. Like on my side, we have like two different things I'm like sending back and forth. Which was trying to also meet Connor's vision of this very abstract outward thinking I haven't really explored doing before. I don't know, Dakota has this like soft spot in my heart solely just because I've named the end of this character, bringing in traits and connecting them to their family, and trying to create a relative background for this non-binary character within a horror narrative, which is something I've never done before, which is a very pleasant thing to learn and experience and grow from, with representation within a story. I'm trying to think of what else. I don't know, there's a lot of traumatic things that I've been working on that you can't really share without giving away too much of a plot. I will say it's been back and forth between Connor and I. Is this okay? Is this not okay? I don't know if it's too much to, right now I'm working on a journal. I don't have pictures of that, but of the character Dakota exploring inside their head and the grief of their little brother while in the process of making, for the first time, I'm learning about music through Connor. So
I should also add, I have not even seen this journal yet.
I'm like, so it's a new experience for me because, last time I was just reading over a script. This time it is actually writing in this. Big experience, and I'm really excited to do more. I don't really know what to share without giving away too much details of this, as also in progress, so we also don't have that much of that.
No, that's awesome. So originally you were sort of a script supervisor in a way, right? You were working with a text that already existed, and this time you're writing, co-writing?
Yes, because Connor took on a game. So the first time I got handed this script, and I was very excited to do that. A few changes have been made, a few not bickering, but like the changing of script is a really big thing to do. But right now, the setting I'm focusing on more is the forest, as someone who lives in the middle of the forest and exploring how creepy it can be in a setting also when when an artist is going kind of insane in a way.
Do you have any sort of traditional background in video game creation, or are you coming at video games from a different angle then?
I don't, as you said last time, I'm artsy-fartsy. Artsy-fartsy video games.
So I should mention that Jasmine was in my class. I didn't just insult her before our meeting.
Because I named out all the weird indie artsy games that I really enjoy. Kind of, I'm in the process of learning how to code through my friends and with help of other professors. I'm coming in more of a creative writer, like fixer of script, more like Connor does the big stuff. Okay, I
don't know what you call big stuff, but
I don't know. I think it's more of like narrative and character development point of view rather than coding. And I mean, part of it is art, but more or less following the pattern of what exactly the image is.
If you don't mind me adding, like the games that I've made in the past, and this one I'm doing with Jasmine right now, have come from more of like a filmmaking perspective than like a video game perspective. And I think that is going to let Jasmine thrive, like being part of the writing team and like co-writing this thing with me. Is that it's not like, it doesn't feel like game writing. Like in my head, I'm writing this and I'm thinking of it more like a movie than a game. And the gameplay is almost minimal at that point. Like my last game, Summerland, was very minimal gameplay. It was walking, clicking, experiencing the story, and I tend to love to tackle games like that. So it's not necessarily like game writing, if that makes sense.
Mm-mm. That was also one of the things beginning of working on scripts and writing them, because I know how to correct scripts and reading and making sure everything flows and a character like just works. Learning how to write a script properly was I'm not gonna lie, it started with how do I write a script in Google, to Microsoft, to learning where to implement like how a character reacts, because also I have to consider, is this able to code? Like, can you put this into like coding? Also, then there's the next consideration of who is going to be reading this off, and if this sounds natural to who's he's selecting to read these. And like, I don't know, it's a big experience. I'm hoping I get better at this as it comes, but I think it's fun for right now.
That sounds excellent. And there's lots of stuff that I would love to follow up on. But for now, let's go to the second half of our presenters, our two MU Game Jam winners. So we'll start with Andrew. Tell us a little bit about you and about your work with video games.
Hello. Okay, so how do I put this? I'm just going to say first and foremost, I'm actually not really much of a game designer. My major is in journalism and English, and I've kind of toyed around with that and decided what do I want to focus in. And I figured out early on that just coding and programming is not really my thing. So a lot of the games that I've made, I'll just share my thing right here. If I can do that. This doesn't mess up this time. 1 sec. And go back here. All right, my apologies. Okay. And I think we should be good. Do we see it? Okay, perfect. So I first started, I guess, my foray into making video games when I was just bored one summer 2014. I was like, I'm going to make a game in PowerPoint. And I sat down and I did. And it was rough around the edges and it's objectively kind of terrible. But it was a learning experience of, to me, just sitting down and buckling down and learning the tools and just kind of forging a path forward and going, I want to make this, and just doing it. It was kind of crazy. It was a little bit insane, but, you know, I sat down and I buckled down and I did it. And I think it was at that moment I realized, you know, as silly as it was, I would kind of, you know, maybe try making some stuff in the future. So there's kind of a recurring theme around all my games. They're sort of rough around the edges because a lot of these are just like I have a really strong concept in my head and I sort of follow through with it and I just kind of keep going along with it. Now, the other part of this is because I'm not really much of a game designer with a capital G, capital D. Most of the stuff is I don't really release it to the public. I think Reality Check, which was the thing that I just submitted for the Game Jam competition with Neil, was honestly just about the only full-on project I've ever actually released to the public, just because I felt that a lot of these weren't really like acceptable for a broad audience because I didn't feel so confident in myself. But so as you can see, the third one right there, and James and Andrew Ruin Christmas, is just something I kind of made for a friend as a joke over the holidays. I relied on a bunch of default assets and just sort of like cobbling stuff together. And I think that honestly, that is something that is crucial to remember and just today, that anyone, I think, can really make a game if they put their mind to it. There's all these tools available, there's information out there for just about everyone. One of my favorite games of all time is called Lisa the Painful. It's by a guy who is a professional martial artist. He's not a musician, he's not a game developer, he's not a writer, but he sat down and he booted up RPG Maker and he threw it together and it was fantastic. He told a really great story and a lot of his experiences kind of filtered through into that. And I think that's really important. You know, a lot of these, they're not really for a broad audience, I suppose, but they're kind of a reflection of me and who I am, my sense of humor, a lot of my ideas. So with how well that Reality Check did and how great people seem to receive that, I'm probably going to be reaching out a little bit more and seeing what else I can do with other people. So my current project called 100 Scenarios there in the bottom left, still kind of RPG Maker. That's my bread and butter. I'm still trying to get myself to learn some other stuff that's not so coding intensive, but it's sort of like an interconnected little web of 100 little things that are sort of a person's, just a little quick idea or something they want to do, like just a collab. And I think that'd be really interesting and have a bunch of perspectives on, what would work, what doesn't, and self-expression. I also have been slowly working on some music. I started doing that. It's sort of been a off and on thing throughout my life. I played piano a little bit when I was a kid, but I realized that just live performances in front of people just wasn't my thing. But over the summer, I found my calling with working with trackers and workstations and stuff like that. And down there is a picture of Famitracker. I think that's I don't remember. I think that's actually the song I used for Reality Check. Could be wrong, but just sort of, I'm learning to use all these tools that are at my disposal now. And I think by doing that, I can finally overcome the barrier that was mostly self-imposed, come to think of it, and reach out and start doing some other stuff.
So I gotta ask, what's Geezer Quest?
Oh yeah, that's are you familiar with like the old man from The Legend of Zelda? It's dangerous to go alone.
Yes, yeah.
It's kind of a funny little take on that. Where like, what if he's just sick of doing that and he's out to get revenge and just put a stop to that? Like, why are these adventurers showing up at my door? It's just kind of a quick little thing about that. It was another RPG Maker thing using a lot of just kind of stock assets because that's what I had to work with, and I didn't quite have the experience that I had at this point. And as I said, with all these tools at your disposal, I think it's important. Just if you have a story to tell, just go ahead and do it. Just get it off your chest.
Would you consider that fan fiction in some way?
It was only inspired by it. It wasn't directly the old man, but it was that theme and that idea of like that trope, I guess, of the old man mentor guy doing that sort of thing. Kind of a funny take on it.
That's really cool. So you're involved with the Game Guild then at Marshall, right? Yes. How has that been? Right, because you're sort of doing this all by yourself. It sounds like, has it been helpful for you to talk
to others?
It has,
yes. Seeing some more people in different aspects. Like I know Ali. I don't know what their last name is. But they are a musician, and I've had some good conversations about them with the tools they use. And I've just gotten a bunch of perspectives, of course, also with Neil, about the projects they've been working on. And we've just we just mostly sat down and been discussing stuff and just analyzing games that we've played, and it's giving me some interesting viewpoints and perspectives into this.
Cool. Wonderful. Let's use that segue to talk about Neil here for a second. Neil, do you want to tell us a little bit about who you are, what you do?
So yes, hello, I'm Neil. Oh, is my mic good, by the way? Okay, I'm Neil. I'm a computer science major. I have a fair bit of what I like to call development with game engine experience, but not game development experience. And I'll explain what I mean by that for a second. So this Game Jam game is the first creative work I've ever made that I've published, but I have used the Unity engine for a while. Specifically, I'm a computer science major, and I've worked on a few more educational projects in the Unity engine as part of my undergraduate research. So it's interesting because even though what I'm developing is not technically a game, there is a lot of elements that I draw from games, just trying to engage it because I have been primarily working on making applications to teach students about these computer science concepts in engaging ways. So we pulled some game elements to make it more exciting, catch your attention more, and just hopefully make computer science more fun. So I can show off that, I suppose. This is the project I've been working on for the past year, and hopefully we'll be able to continue working on this summer. We're not back on the application for that yet, but so I'll share that right now, if that's fine. So I'll share this in the browser because it's actually hosted on Chrome. If you want to look at it, I can actually link it and it'd be helpful for my research also. So what we have here is mine and my partner's project. His name's Cameron Green, and he's been very helpful with it. And I've been working under Dr. Husnu Narman to get this, and I will hopefully be sharing it off in a few weeks for a symposium. So this is PWS C-Specs, Project Work Studio. That's what I work under, the cybersecurity packet simulator. So effectively, sorry, it's a little bit slow. These domains that are free aren't necessarily the best, and so when you're working on a budget of not very much, you have to compromise sometimes. But we have effectively made a simulated routing network, and it's not super much of a game. It's primarily for education, but you have your goals, and then you're just supposed to achieve them. So this is supposed to explain how anti-networking, routing, cybersecurity, all these concepts work. So we want to have a packet travel the most efficient path, basically. And it visualizes that for the student to understand. And then they have some questions that they can hopefully learn something in a little bit more fun way than just being in a lecture. So that's the gist of it. I do have a testing document if anyone here wants to try out themselves and give me some data for my report. I would very much appreciate that.
I think it's a cool idea. If you have something like a link or your contact info that you want to drop in the chat, feel free to do that. I think it's a neat idea. That already looked much better than most hacking mini games I've encountered in video games. So that's pretty neat.
Well,
I'll say I took computer science in high school, and if I had that, it would have made my life so much easier.
I will say the thought process is this was designed very different because this was designed with computer science in mind first, and then it being a game second. So it's admittedly very technical and focused on the details, and maybe it's a little bit less fun because of that, but it's hopefully a good balance between being educational while still being at least more entertaining than a normal homework. So I will send this doc link. If anyone wishes to do this, I would appreciate it. You can fill out the survey first, try it out, and then fill out the post survey. Or if you don't want to do the surveys, you can just explore it yourself.
Thank you. That's an excellent way to make use of our attendees here. And I am monitoring for questions in the chat. So if somebody has a question, do pop it in the chat and I'll raise that as soon as I see it. One of the questions that I have right away is a lot of you are working on purposefully smaller projects, right? Thematically, in terms of game mechanics. And obviously, when a lot of people think about video games, they think about GTA, right? AAA, fancy schmancy graphics, right? Where do you see the space for game creation, like the kind of creation that you're pursuing? Whoever wants to take it first.
I mean, I guess I think that the indie space allows a lot more room for exploration than the AAA space does, like despite the budget. And I think that's just because of audience. I know a lot of cases like, the big AAA studios, Rockstar, Activision, Blizzard, whatever, they have an expectation on them, and it's to deliver this product. But when you're a small indie studio, you can really make whatever you want without having to worry about the audience reception to that, and more just being able to experiment with new mechanics that you've never seen before. And a lot of times that will end up like back into the AAA space if it like pans out well. But I also think that having those restrictions allows you to make more creative ideas and allows you to work with what you have. There's always something to be said for unlimited resources versus minute resources in terms of getting creative with what you're available to work with. And I think the indie space is very important for that reason, and having that experimentation and that risk taking involved.
I also think that going I also think that going smaller scale kind of allows you to just fully explore and fixate on it, where you're not trying to like drown it out with other mechanics. You can just have the one thing and explore it fully. That's how I see it.
I definitely think at least in my experience, over-scoping is the #1 killer of any project. If you start from the outset and over-scope yourself, that is how you end up with a project that just kind of never really finishes. But if you set a scope for yourself that you know you can do, and then maybe you complete that and just expand it if you want to do more, then at the very least, when you get to the end, you will have a product. It may not be the best product or the biggest product, but the way I see it is a small game that's okay is better than a giant game that is never finished.
I'm very guilty of that.
No, the first thing I ever tried to make was like, and it never happened, obviously, but it was like a third-person multiplayer shooter, whatever. Obviously didn't happen because I was like 12 and I don't know how to make a server. But it's a learning experience. You got to scale back to what you know. And Jasmine, I feel like this even translates like the type of stuff you do. I know you're not like specifically in games, but like with writing and everything, there's probably some overlap in that regard with like bigger scale projects versus like the small things.
Yeah, you're not wrong. I can't really say anything because coding wise, I'm in the trying to launch a website phase, which it's kind of just a joke at that point of me learning. But I will say for my own projects, when you go with a concept that is like way out of the box, if you do not hold on to that passion for that idea, it makes it impossible not only to finish it, but like get the motivation to start that. It's not fun. It's not a fun place to be with creative writing either.
So we have writers, right? And we have coders here and various ways that makes us. So do you see any tension between narratives and game mechanics? Where do you start? What problems do you encounter? Right? It's the old sort of ludonarrative dissonance debate. Where do you fall on that?
The issue for me is that sometimes like story comes first and gameplay comes second. And that usually really never amounts to anything because I'm like, okay, how can I make this reflect this? Or it's just the gameplay becomes a slog because I'm trying to include too much story in it and some jokes and make them all work. and it just kind of just falls flat. Well, I've noticed that the ones that are gameplay first, they work out, but they're kind of shallow. So at least from my experience, I've had better results going gameplay first, story second, but that doesn't mean just to exclude it entirely.
See, I'm the total opposite. I am the complete and utter opposite. I focus on narrative like wholeheartedly, and like whatever gameplay comes next is what comes next. Like two of my favorite games of all time, like just period, are Firewatch and What Remains of Edith Finch, and those are like in my top 5. And those games have so little gameplay, and it's really opened my eyes to like the walking simulator genre as a whole, and I've fallen so head over heels in love with it. And that's the genre I've like stuck to for a while, is that walking simulator, minimal gameplay, story first, because I feel like if you make this like single player experience and you're really invested in this narrative, I think, and this isn't in all cases, but potentially has the ability to make such a great impact on a person, as opposed to like having a really, really good gameplay, but like not much story there. There's a miracle that happens when you can combine them both. Like if you get amazing gameplay that like ties into a story, well, I like the cat. Hi. If you have like amazing gameplay and it ties well into a story and it like meets in this happy middle ground, then you've like have this masterpiece unicorn. But I'm very much a proponent of story being an incredibly important part of that experience. Or you like have Uncharted. If you've played Uncharted, where like you're this hero adventurer, and then like during gameplay you like massacre hundreds of people, and then you're still the good guy in cutscenes. So there's that ludonarrative dissonance for you.
So you're embracing the charge of the walking simulator.
Oh, I love the walking simulator. It's I think it needs more respect. I see too many reviews on stuff like Firewatch being like, it's not even a game. It's not even, but it's good. Even if it's not like a game in the traditional sense, it's enjoyable and it's fun and people like it. I love it.
Me too. So how do you encounter mechanics, Jasmine, when you're writing? How do you account for that? Do you like think through it as sort of pathways? Do you map it out? How do you do that?
Mechanics as in like, how would this like convert into a game? Is that what you're asking?
I mean, how do you write a story for a game, right? Most stories, right, as a sort of a detective flip book, then you have branching paths, but mostly, right, it's straightforward. How do you account for the tension between a straightforward story and choices?
Really, honestly, I feel like it depends what the work I'm working on. For like exploration games where you can like move outwards, I would definitely find myself more. The thing I do with fiction and writing is this humanly possible? And from when like the script writing of like what you're supposed to do or what I'm putting like a movie is now I'm now acting them out, whether if this is realistic or not. I also like walking simulator games. The one you definitely called artsy fartsy was Little Miss Unfortunate or something. The cute little. It's a good game.
I didn't say anything to the contrary.
And Franbo, but I don't really know. Just like game dynamic over narrative. I'm obviously gonna be like a narrative story person. That's what I'm here for. Yeah, I don't know if I can really answer that the way that's supposed to be.
I think that was a good answer, right? I always wonder, right, when you're writing this wonderful moment, you sometimes imagine somebody doing something entirely inappropriate on screen, right? How does, right? Because that's one of the tricky things, right? It happens so often in video games that they either force you to look at something or they don't force you, right? And then plot might happen without you even noticing, right? And I was just wondering how a creator primarily interested in the writing part here encounters that. And I think you answered that very eloquently.
Oh, also, are you talking, Ali? I also might know that person you were talking about. I have Japanese class with them, if I am correct. They do music stuff, and their dream, they told me, was to be music design in gaming. So that was
Yeah,
actually one of the people I talked to about and was planning on being like, hey, what would you do in like in a musical journal? That surprised me that you mentioned them. I absolutely adore them. They're very good at what they do.
So it sounds like we're already exchanging tips here on who to talk to and that kind of stuff. And that's actually not like a bad thing to consider, right? Let's talk about tips that you have for people that are interested in sort of dipping their toes into video game making or that are already at Marshall, right? Most of, I would assume, people watching here are at Marshall, right? How do you recommend they would go about this, right? Are there specific classes you recommend, specific things that helped you get into the idea of making something? Any tips or wisdoms you might want to share with us?
I say start small, look for the tools available. Look for tutorials, look for things that are beginner friendly. There's all these programs out there that require like very minimal coding or just have all the work done for you. If you just want to like get started and do something small and see if you really like it, that's definitely what I recommend. Or just, even play around with a level creator. Just there's lots of games that have like an open-ended level creator aspect. I partially got into making games myself through a game called WarioWare Do It Yourself. One of my favorites. And the whole thing is just a level creator. Things like Little Big Planet. Just try this out, mess with it, and if you want to go further than that, just see what's out there. That's what I think should be the first step.
I can still tell you where my house in Morrowind was that I made in the level creator. I still remember that fondly. Yeah, go ahead. Sorry, Connor.
Little Big Planet was my awakening, man. I freaking love Little Big Planet. I remember I would like go home from school and spend hours like making levels and releasing them through that app. The logic is so like program heavy, and you don't realize it because it's all visual. Dude, I love that game. But if I have tips, I have a few like ground rules I stick by when I tell people like how to start making games. Like Andrew said, start small. I know too many developers that have had these like huge ambitions and projects. Like know what you're good at. Like know what you're able and capable to do and what you can realistically accomplish in that time frame. Because even if it's not like everything you want it to be, you made something. And at the end of the day, I think that's very important that you made something. My other tip, I guess, is just be aware that your first, second, third, fourth, whatever game is going to be awful. Your first game is going to be garbage, and you should love it and care for it like your child and release it anyways. Not like on a big publication, and don't charge for it, but release it for free. And know that it's bad and that you're going to learn from this. My first game was terrible. And I made the mistake of releasing it on Steam. I don't know how that even happened. It got through Greenlight when Greenlight was a thing. People hated it. The reviews are like 50% positive right now because it was not good, and I was 13. But yeah, like your first game is going to be bad. Be aware of that and like learn from it. If you want to make games, just do it. Like there's nothing really stopping you other than how intimidating it might feel at first. There are so many resources. There are so many free resources. Anyone can make a game now. And I really, really, really encourage anyone who's interested to just start doing it. As blunt as that sounds, like just do it. and like it's because again, it's very accessible now.
I remember you asked, classes that you would recommend here at Marshall. Well, I know this might be a little bit difficult because it has a prerequisite of CIT 263, so I think you have to take at least 2 unrelated classes for that, but it's not too bad if you are looking for a minor and you're very invested. I would definitely recommend the game dev classes here at Marshall. I have taken Game Dev 1, 2D, Game Dev 2, 3D, and Mobile Game Dev here at Marshall, and I felt like I have learned a lot. It's honestly something that has got me back into kind of doing more creative projects. Has taught me a lot of useful things that I did not know just from being self-taught about these engines, Unity, Unreal. Like my entire Game Jam submission is entirely founded upon what I learned in Game Dev 1. So if you really are interested and you want to get more familiarized with the technical side, I would recommend those classes.
Didn't realize it was my turn. Well, I feel like my advice is if you're bringing in the perspective of others, such as like really big characters, you need to know them better than you know yourself. It is really hard to write a good character that is also realistic, and the dialogue flows, without knowing like little traits. Like my favorite thing is with building Dakota and my little thing, because like these aren't canon things, but this is how I would assume this person would act. It could be anything from like loves the color blue to like won't eat broccoli on a Tuesday. You need to know your character because there is no story if you do not have a believable character, whether that is the arc of being a villain or being a hero. I'm like, you need to know these things. But also, I don't really design games. I do the writing part, creative part. I recommend Sims. That's how I base my thing off. My little building of what I'm talking about. So I have like not a physical, but outside of like a mental version of what I'm talking about. And it also, for me personally, it just makes it easier. So when I'm thinking of how this character would react, of putting them in a world that I can control, it's almost like an experiment. But like, that's all my advice would be. Know your character and also know where you're talking about. Without a good character and without a good setting, you don't have a story. And it can't be like, oh, the sky was blue and there's grass where I live. Know the place, know the traditions, and know the people are my advice.
Are you saying that there's official Project Songbird headcanon?
She doesn't like that they don't like broccoli? Yes, that.
Headcanon from the official writers of the game. I love it.
It's the merch. Just broccoli.
Yeah, we'll release the merch with zero explanation.
That's the best. Yeah.
Also, there's another thing that I thought of that's very important when you're like getting into the world of games, or I guess any art form really. One of the most valuable assets you can have is connections. And the best way to go about that is, like I said, just release things and reach out to people. I've sent out hundreds upon hundreds of emails that have gotten zero replies, but it makes it worth it when you get 5 replies out of that. And those 5 replies go on to be people you work with in the future. That then opens your windows to like what you can do. When I was 12 and making these video games and starting this company, I had no one. I had my dad to like help me with some technical stuff, but that's about it. Then I started releasing things. I started reaching out to more people. Social media is a huge one. And I've found a lot of help through social media, especially like TikTok and Instagram, like huge game changers. And through those, I've been able to meet some awesome people. I've been able to make connections. My next game has, or not the one with Jasmine Songbird, the Dread X one I'm working on has some crazy. Like I'm still impressed with the people who agreed to be on this project as like voice cast. If you're familiar with I don't know, Dying Light 2. Beastars, Jonah Scott, who voices Legoshi in Beastars and Aiden in Dying Light 2, is in this new game I'm making as one of the main characters, as well as Jenny Yokobori, who's in Genshin Impact and Tokyo Ghostwire, and Garrett Watts, YouTube guy. He's also in it, and like those connections are going to be so valuable down the line, and establishing those early on is like a very important step in becoming an artist in any form.
That's actually how I started working with Connor. The message in Snapchat, can you read this? And that is why I'm here now. This was, I think it was almost a year ago.
That and the Governor School for the Arts.
That's true.
That was a big one. That's how I met Jonah. Jonah's my drummer now. Dude, GSA was a huge deal. Also, I want to see more questions in the chat. I'd love to answer questions. Talking is my favorite thing.
Yes, so I'm hoping people are able to answer post stuff in the chat. It looks like everybody's joined. So please do ask questions in the chat. If you're encountering any issues with that, raise your hand, and I'll just give you moderator status, and then you can just talk. That's also an option. we have sort of a nice group of people listening in, which is awesome. In the meantime, because I feel like I'm a teacher, I need to, one of the things I'd like to know, we have somebody typing, we'll get to it in a second. What's one skill that you didn't expect you needed and that you learned right away? Like, what's one thing you didn't expect to need to make a video game that you're now very happy that you have?
So this is a very technical one, but it's really bit me in game dev 1 and 2 when I was not very good at it, or when you have a lot of people working. It's source control and using Git and GitHub, because when you're getting into using like gaming using Unity, Unreal, you think, oh, I'm just going to be using this game engine. I get to use like fun code and all that sort of stuff. No. When you have a bunch of people working on it, you need to understand how not fun, what I like to call not fun coding, like GitHub and Git works. Because if you have two people working on the same branch at the same time and they both push, then the computer's going to see this one's different than the other one, which one is the real one, and throws you an error, and then it doesn't work anymore. So learning how to manage that, it's a little bit more command line than I thought I would be doing for game development, but that's just how it works when you're working digitally over the internet with several people on a project.
I'd say one of the bigger ones for me, and I haven't even gotten there. I'm not even there yet with being good at this. Is learning that your stuff is not perfect and it never will be. And I'm still awful at that. And I will sit in my room, like in this like dark corner, being like, I need to make this absolutely perfectly perfect in every way. I'm still like terrible with criticism. Like if someone says they don't like something about the game, I'm like, I'm going to die. And this is like everything is collapsing and I hate life. And if you can get out of that headspace, then that's like, I think, a key element. And again, this is just applying to any art form, is like, just know it's not going to be perfect and that you have to accept that people aren't going to like certain things about it and that people are mean. Not saying all criticism's mean, just saying that people will be mean. I've gotten some very mean comments and reviews on Steam. I've released every project on Steam, and I've gotten some reviews. I've definitely received reviews. So just keeping that in mind. Also, Neil, I like the nails. I feel like we're matching here in a spiritual context.
Thank you. Like them too. Yours.
Oh, we have Braxton. I also have given Braxton talking permissions, but so Braxton is asking, what's the hardest thing that you ran into during your time making / writing your video games? Like the biggest obstacles you ran into?
For me, it's definitely burnout and personal motivation. This is a big thing when you're working on a project and you're the only person working on it and there's no one to hold you to keep working on it, where sometimes it just feels like you're not getting anywhere, nothing's working, there's things you should be doing instead, and then this project just kind of ends up on the shelf and never goes anywhere. So that's something I've been fighting with a lot for my own personal projects, and honestly is what my Game Jam game was completely about, was just this feeling of not being able to focus on my projects and constantly leaving them unfinished.
For me, it's scope. It's dealing with the scope of the whole thing, and either fleshing out like an idea that's really small and you don't know what to do with it, or something that's like so grandiose and massive you have no way to scale it down. And a lot of the time, that's usually a huge roadblock for me, where it's just like, I don't know what to do with this, or my mind is like in 50 different places. Where I'm like, okay, I gotta add this to this part. Oh, that would be a good thing if this did this, or this area should have like a volcano, or I don't know. And it's just this big, it winds up this big incoherent mess, and then I drop it for a while. Then I come back to it. I'm like, what the heck was I doing? I don't even know where to pick this up. and because it's just all over the place. So you got to find a happy medium between like, you know, it's a decent size you can like elaborate on something, but not like so massive where, especially if you're only doing it with one person. With one person, it's like really, really hard to do something huge. Just, you know, size it down, chunk it down, keep it at a spot where you can work with it. That's what I'd say.
Okay. Oh, excuse my voice. I guess mine was with working with people, you have to learn. I'm a very detailed person. Like, I love big words and like little details that sometimes are a little too much in games. Because I am a big, like I said, I'm a big character person. So I feel like I'm like throwing rocks at Connor at times with how many like details I want to be like, this should be in here and this should be. I'd say minimalize like the amount you need. You need a good foundation for a character, but there is an extent where it's too much and it just sounds like, my example, I'm just going to say Five Nights at Freddy lore that's going on, where it's just so much. It can be enjoyable, but too much in one game will cause somebody to lose interest, personally.
Dude, I actually love Five Nights at Freddy's. Like ignoring like the controversies with like Scott Cawthon. That is probably like the A+ example of how to take criticism for something. Because Five Nights at Freddy's spawned from a children's game that was unintentionally terrifying. Like the character designs were awful and the graphics were like horrendous, but like he pushed forward with it, and I admire that. But I'd say one of the biggest struggles I've run into isn't necessarily with making the game, and more so with the post-release. And it is like the public perception. I'm very thankful that I have gotten to a point in game development where I have an audience, and I have like a lot of followers, and I can release stuff and I can tell people and they'll see it. But it's hard in a way because there's a lot of eyes on you like all the time. Like on TikTok, I'm always worried about like what people are perceiving when I talk about games, and am I talking about this game enough? And am I talking about the game too much? Am I not doing these things enough? And then you have to worry about the game being released, and are people liking the game, and are the reviews good, and are people like telling me I should die because my games are bad? like that type of stuff is like the stuff you deal with being releasing a game into the public and having a few eyes on it. And I'd say that's really the most difficult aspect is the public perception and reception.
Thank you. That's awesome. So I have given everyone in attendance speaking rights. So if somebody wants to ask a question using voice, you may do so now. All right. That's my pedagogical brief pause here. Nobody's racing to ask a question. Great. So in that case, let's wrap it up because we have this allotted for an hour. And I thought maybe a nice final gesture is, can you recommend, each one of you, one game to us that people might not know or might not be playing and should? And that can be a game that's just great, or a game that doesn't work in an interesting way where you still think it's worth looking at it. So this is your chance to sort of pitch a game to us to play that we might not be playing otherwise.
I think I brought up Lisa the Painful earlier. Definitely highly recommend it. It is story first, gameplay second, but just from the perspective of the person who made it, it was just, okay, I'm going to make a game, despite the fact I'm not really like a creator. I mean, he made like a prequel beforehand, but that was years and years ago. He just sat down, did the Kickstarter, did it, and it's just phenomenal for what it is. And the story really, like, it's super tear-jerking. There's lots of funny and great moments in it. It's got a really memorable cast of characters. And the whole just scenario and setting of the entire thing is, you can't forget it. It's really good.
I heard really good things about that. It's been sitting in my Steam library for a while, waiting for me.
Check it out. It's good.
But yeah, no, that's what I heard. Yeah, and so you said there's a prequel. Is there a second part as well, or am I mixing that
Yeah,
up?
there's like a sequel DLC to it that kind of explains, wraps up some of the open ends of the first one, but it's not so good. But definitely play the Painful. The Joyful, the sequel, it's not as good, but it's if you want to play it. But definitely the Painful for sure.
Cool, thank you.
So admittedly, this game doesn't really have much of a story. It's just kind of a game I enjoy a lot. And if I were to make a game that were to cater to my incredibly specific tastes, it would be similar to this. I am a very big fan of latest FYRE. I really like card games in general. There is some more to it, but really it is just kind of an endless roguelite game. But if you're into card games and you just kind of want something that you can just play while, I don't know, watching videos, watching Netflix, just something somewhat strategic, but really you can just keep playing it over and over again. It's one of my favorite games.
It's excellent. I'm awful at it, but it's excellent.
I have beat it on all characters. It took me dozens of hours to get to that point.
Yeah, I've beaten, I think, every single one once, but that's sort of my skill ceiling. So I could not do something else while playing that, but that might just be me getting old. Thank you so much. Yeah, that's a really good recommendation. I think just Jasmine and Connor has already mentioned a few, but is there something else you want to recommend?
Right. Okay, I'll go first, I guess. Gosh, another artsy fartsy game, as I've said for the third time. Okay, I don't know. Most of the games I play are like either I'm trying to think of what they're like click an option and then they'll tell you like a story prompt that happens and then you'll get your character. I'm playing a one in Japanese with my Japanese class and just making it. I'm trying to practice, but one I would recommend is Parsnip, and it's a recent indie game. It's like a cute bunny going down, and it sounds so weird to describe. It's very indie. Cute bunny going to the neighbors. You're like, oh, it can't get worse. And there's like a satanic like background in it that one wrong move and like talking to the people around will mess it up. But one like the game I was talking about is also Cooking Companions, which is just a click and what happens. But it also has a really darker subtext to it of, it sounds weird to be like cannibalism and starvation in the woods, all while looking super sweet and girly. But yeah, it sounds a little crazy right now, but I love those games. Very great games.
Awesome. I'm sensing a theme. Thank you. Connor.
God, artsy fartsy games are my bread and butter. Like that's like all I play. I have not yet jumped into Elden Ring, but I've been playing stuff like The Artful Escape and what's the one I just got? It's like Harmony Blue or something. I don't even remember. But I'd say if I would recommend one game right now, it would be a game called Gree, which was published by Devolver Digital a few years ago. It's a 2D platformer, and it might be one of the most beautiful games like I've ever played. It's all hand painted watercolors for one, and the soundtrack is absolutely beautiful with these like droning electronics and synth orchestrals. The story is a dialogueless narrative, so it's very much visual storytelling that goes through the stages of grief in a very, very poignant way. And each level tackles the stages of grief through color. And as you progress through this game, like color gets added to the world, and there's a lot of symbolism with song. And whenever the discussion comes up of video games as an art form, this is the one thing I recommend. It's spelled GRIS. I think it's Spanish because it was from a Spanish developer. But the game is called Gree. I highly recommend.
Thank you so much. I heard of most of those, which makes me feel very connected with the youths. So thank you so much for sharing that. Thank you so much for volunteering your time to talk to us this evening. I hope this was of interest to those listening in live, to those who are hopefully watching this in the future on YouTube. Our next event will probably be on April 13th at 11 a.m., which will be the launch event for the Thomas Cromer Archive, which is a digital archive dedicated to a Huntington local author that I'm developing with one of my classes. So that's going to be fun. And a little bit after that, we'll have another event like this time focused on faculty, and we'll have 2 faculty members and 2 students that they're working with talk about projects that they're currently finalizing, sort of at the nexus between sort of archiving, computer stuff, and humanities. So thank you so much. If you have an interest in the digital humanities at Marshall, shoot me an email, go to our website, marshall.edu/dh. Thank you so much for coming out. Have a wonderful rest of your week and a good night. Thank you.